Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 277. My name is Bally and I'm in the driver's seat tonight. Normally I'm on the back, but tonight I'm in the driver's seat. I'm on the front of the Mario Kart Double Dash kart, and MBZ, he's firing weapons out the back.
Got a shell.
Got a shell.
Oh, it goes behind. I hit Diddy Kong, yeah.
How's it going, MBZ? Why are you on the back of the Mario Kart?
So Bally, you might be able to tell from my voice, dear listener, I'm not in the best of places. You can tell, coughing through a conversation. I got, finally, it's defeated me. I spent 4 years being that person who's like, I never got COVID, that wasn't me, couldn't be me. And guess what? I went to America, and the first thing they did to me, they fucking just shot me with COVID. They're like, you motherfucker.
Man, turns out they have it over there as well.
Yeah, they got it over there. It's worse over there, apparently, even worse. So, I went to Chicago and came back, and I flew back, and I had jet lag. And you know what's the best recipe for jet lag? Is getting sick as well. And so I have been dealing with jet lag and COVID, which is like hit me very, very hard.
Don't forget those high pollen levels.
Of course, yes, I've got a bit of hay fever going on as well. It's just like the best combo possible. And so, this episode has been delayed for a little bit as a result of that. I'm just not in a fit state to do any recording. You can argue I'm still not, but I'm here, all right? I'm going to try, so we're going to give it our best go. But
you did get some gaming in before you came down with the sickness, so
I certainly did.
Got a little bit to talk about.
Yes, for sure, yeah.
Why don't I lay out the show? Because I know I normally do that and you're in the seat that does that, but I should do that just because you're falling apart.
Sure.
For the first segment, we're going to talk about some of the games that we have been playing. And for the second segment, we are going to get to some emails that people have sent in. But first, let's get to what I have been playing. I have been playing a little game called Dave the Diver. For those who don't know, it's a very popular game that came out last year. And it's not a roguelike, but it's a run-based game, I would say, because you are diving, and during the day you were doing dives. You do 2 dives per day, and then you can do a third dive at nighttime if you choose to, but then by night you are taking everything that you caught, turning it into sushi and making money, and that's basically the gaming loop, as it were. So it's awesome. I absolutely love Dave the Diver. Like, I think it's just an absolutely incredible game. And MZ, I know you've been playing a little bit of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to say like 9 hours into the game so far. And I just got to chapter 3. I've heard interesting things about the back half of Dave the Diver. I really like the loop that it has to begin with, of like going down, getting like more fish to feed the restaurant, to then power up your ability so you can go deeper down. Like, you increase the strength of your harpoon so it does more damage. You increase like your oxygen level, which one of the things I really like about this game is how it takes that oxygen underwater, and it also uses it as a health bar, right? So you obviously will run out of oxygen, you'll have to like go back to the surface. I think you lose a bunch of stuff. I've actually never run out of oxygen up to this point, so I don't know what happens. But if you come across like a big shark and you're like, oh, I've only got like 100 oxygen, if that shark hits you, it can take like 50 away from you. And so it's basically this lovely balance between your health with those underwater creatures, but also just like having enough oxygen to stay alive and move around. And there's this also, kind of encumbrance system in there. So you can go overweight with how many fish you're carrying.
You can gamble like hell and you're like, I'm too heavy to swim fast and the shark is coming after me. And
oh my God,
it's bad.
It can be a bad situation, but I think it's very funny though, because I get to those situations where I'm deep underwater and I'm like, well, I've got a way that I can get out of here. But first of all, I'm just going to overstuff my bag, right? Because there's a point at which you can just not actually take any more and the game will ban you.
Right.
So I basically go up to that limit every time, so I just get away with the most stuff possible, basically.
And then, there are points underwater where you can essentially get a submarine or a pod is sent down and will get you, and you retain all your stuff. You don't have to swim back to the surface every time, which is pretty useful, which is definitely how it felt at the start of the game.
That's the thing I really like about it, I think, is to some degree it becomes very easy. I don't think the game is supposed to be challenging, but it's very easy to just stay underwater for really as long as you like. And I would say the only limiting factor is the size of your backpack, because frankly, the amount of underwater capsules there are that fully restore your oxygen, or the pickups you can get that restore your oxygen. Like, there's so much of that stuff around that you can stay under there for ages and ages. And I was finding there to start to be an imbalance between the restaurant stuff and the underwater stuff, because I think at the very start of the game, the first like 3 hours or so, it feels like you're spending 5 minutes underwater, 3 minutes in the restaurant, and it's this really nice balance of both. Eventually you get so good at going underwater, diving down, that you're spending 20 minutes underwater and 3 minutes in the restaurant again. So you feel like, okay, I'm spending all this time underwater and barely spending any time in the restaurant, and I've also hired a bunch of people in the restaurant, and so all I'm doing in the restaurant now is like pouring people beer and washing the table, and so it becomes like this almost automated process, which I don't know how to feel about necessarily. Like, I enjoy the kind of power ramp of it, but I'm also like, well, this is slightly less engaging now because I'm not actually panicking as much or like trying to get around and fix stuff, but it is cool.
I would say I was with you when I was 4 or 5 hours in. I was like, I get this loop. Like, you do the fishing like you said, and the balance doesn't feel great. And I kind of felt like this after 5, 6 hours. I was like, okay, well, I've actually now maxed out the power on my harpoon, and I'm only 6 hours into the game, and like, what else does this game have to offer? And MZ, I've played a lot of this game.
Okay, whereabouts are you?
I have beaten this game.
Wait, really?
I have played 28.
Wait, I didn't see that on Twitter.
I beat this game today, and I'm 28. I did it in 28 hours.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, in just under 2.5 weeks, I've just like gone. I dove deep for Dave the Diver.
I see. Yeah.
It really got its hooks into me, and it's hard to talk about Dave the Diver, the fishing puns.
It's inevitable. Look, it's gonna happen.
But I was really impressed by the way this game does so many different things after 6, 7, 8 hours, where it introduces new mechanics, new systems, new things, new characters, new everything, arguably, and it takes you out of your comfort zone and forces you to engage in more meaningful ways. And by the end of the game, Caroline was watching me playing and was like, how do you keep up with all these things? And I'm like, Caroline, this game is amazing at rolling things out gradually. And like, I think this game honestly rolls out systems right up until the end of that 28 hours. That's
what I've heard.
There were still systems coming, and I don't know how much you know about this sort of second half, latter third of the game, MBZ, but there's a lot.
Yeah, no. So what I've heard from people is that the game at the start with that loop is not actually representative of what the final game ends up being, right? Because eventually you start doing so many different things that it becomes something entirely different. And so I've heard people not love the idea that it basically is shallow in terms of its depth, where it's like it does 70 different things, but they're all done to a shallow level, as opposed to doing those two things from the very beginning, but going deeper and deeper on those, which I don't mind so much. I'm interested to see where it goes and what it has, but I definitely see the argument of like, well, if you just double down on this diving and restaurant stuff, I think you could have made something that had the depth of a Stardew Valley in the way that it goes into its systems and just keeps building on those core systems to elevate them to a thing that feels like you could endlessly do, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it doesn't double down on systems in that sense, and what I mean by that is you are still getting specific customers asking for specific fish, sharks, rare things, you name it, right up until the end. And arguably they're maybe not part of the main story, but they, in my mind, they almost are in particular. In particular, like the specific guests that appear in the sushi bar and they say, I need this thing in 3 days and you have to go and get it. Because those characters often are then linked to the rollout of new mechanics and new systems often. And I found that whole process incredibly gratifying. And I do kind of, I see what people are saying with the whole, you get to the end of the game, you realize it's actually quite shallow. I'll say that for maybe a quarter, maybe as much as a third of the systems, but I'm still convinced that there are a lot of systems the game rolls out between hours, say 5 and, I don't know, 20 that are really meaningful, and you need them to, reach the financial barriers that you need to upgrade, like your diving suit and all these things. Like, you will realize that, if I try to make all that money with my existing systems, it'll take me 10 times longer than if I utilize what these new systems offer. And I think in that sense, the game's quite rewarding, where you don't actually have to go for any of the systems. Like I said, you could just do your existing loop in the areas and do the existing thing with the fish, specific fish you've already caught, and upgrade those fish. And you could just do that, but you'd probably beat the game in much longer time, I'd argue. I think if you engage in the systems, there are definite, I wouldn't say shortcuts, but there are ways of creating impressive dishes that sell for more money. And that money is that positive feedback loop that's so popular with Stardew, where it kind of will give you the upgrades faster. And I think that's what I found so rewarding about this game.
Do you feel like the diving drops off by the back half of the game? Because I think that's something that doesn't worry me necessarily, but I really like the mechanics of the underwater stuff, like the way in which you aim and shoot at fish, all that stuff, just the exploration of it. It just feels like because there are these other systems, you maybe don't spend as much time engaging with that through the rest of the game.
I mean, I think the sharks get bigger and badder and tougher, and in order to not to die, you need to survive, and in order to survive, you need to kill those sharks. And in order to kill those sharks, you need the bigger, badder guns. And in order to get the bigger, badder guns, you've got to do more diving to get the good shit, to get your weapon upgrades through the anime man.
And the anime man, yes.
He's so great. And like, we should talk about the characters in this game.
Yeah, can we talk about, by the way, how fucking good these cutscenes are? Holy shit.
They're immaculate.
They are insane.
The music, the timing, the editing, really, really impressive. And I'd say like the whole character of this game and the writing is amazing. But yeah, back to that feedback loop. Like, I think the diving still stays strong for the reason of survivability. Like, you do need, there are aspects where there are main story progressions that won't require a lot of upgrades, but at the same time, to get to those points, you're doing bloody well if you can get to those points without doing the upgrades, as it were. So
right.
I think
but what you're saying is you still are doing a lot of diving throughout the rest of the game, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to hear.
You think you've seen it all, and then there's more, and then you do all that, and you think that you've seen it all, and then there's more, and not in a kind of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth way, but in a more kind of like, oh cool, right, okay, right, we're doing this kind of way. Which is cool, and I think that's really awesome about this game. Like, something at the start of the game is really mysterious, and they gradually just peel back so many layers. It's insane. And I don't think this game narratively is phenomenal, but I think the writing is very strong, and I think that the beat to beat is good. And I've said before how much I'm a sucker for a game like Moonglow Bay, and the main reason for that is you've got your loop, you've got your thing that you're doing, you've got your run-based system. So in Moonglow Bay, you're going out in a boat and you're fishing off the boat. You're not diving, obviously. And Dave the Divers is very similar in many ways. And then you're coming back, and in Moonglow Bay, you're cooking and selling, and it's a kind of like a low-key sushi bar in some ways. It's a very similar loop in that sense. But what's so great about Moonglow Bay is there is a meaningful story happening, and there are story beats, and there is a beginning, middle, and end. And this is a reason that I absolutely love Moonglow Bay and Dave the Diver, and even a game like Hades. Is it's a run-based game, but it has a beginning, middle, and end, and a narrative. And I can finish it in a given amount of time and see credits and feel satisfied. And that's something that, as great as Stardew Valley is, and it does have certain narrative structure points that I think the game does great at, I love Stardew Valley. I lean more towards games wanting a little more beginning, middle, and end. I don't love the whole open-ended nature of maybe Stardew Valley, where I love the loop. I don't love the open-ended nature of it. I think a game like Dave the Diver is so good at saying, yep, and that's credits, and if you want to do more, I guess you can do more, and I'm sure there's rewards for doing that. I'm not personally that interested in those rewards. But equally, you've seen credits, you've seen all the systems this game has to offer, and that's that. And I think that's what's so great about it.
Yeah, it's interesting as well, because it feels like there is it's like a tinge of Metroidvania here to the game also, right?
Yes.
Where you are getting certain abilities, or like items at least, that will help you navigate further through the environment, or obviously upgrading your your suit lets you go deeper, and that is another thing as well. But yeah, I think it's cool that there's a way in which you can go back to the surface and you will encounter things differently because you now have a different thing. So, for example, I kept seeing these like tiny little pixel thing because I'm playing on Steam Deck, right? And I'm like, is that a fish I can catch? And I shoot my thing and it goes through it, and I'm like, guess that's just background decoration. And then you get a net from a character. I was like, oh, so those tiny little bitty things that weren't even a pixel
like shrimps
big,
and seahorses and cleons, I think they're called.
Yes, really tiny things. You realize, oh, I can use a net to kind of like get all those. So did you get close to like filling out all the fish, collecting them all? Because I think there's a satisfaction to that, but it's also like kind of the Pokemon thing of like, well, you got to go explore and find them all. I
did a lot of the systems in this game, but the one thing I didn't do was like try to get all the fish, try to get all the dishes. There is a more actual Pokemon thing, and I'll be honest, like I couldn't actually get the first Pokemon they ask you to essentially get. Like it kept killing me. I didn't understand how I was meant to kill it or destroy it, and then I was like, I don't actually need to engage in this system. I'm just going to enjoy the other systems and move on. So that's something I'd be interested if you pick it up and want to go down that line, you'll probably get something cool. But I didn't really feel that from this game. I was much more like, I'll be honest, I spent a lot of this game upgrading my sniper rifle. Everyone knows me. Okay. I like turtling. I like standing back. Oh boy, there are some seriously aggressive buggers in this game who will absolutely go for you. And I cannot recommend highly enough going for something a bit more long range like the sniper rifle. And by the end of the game, I upgraded that thing to max, and it was very, very, very useful. I think the game is very generous about plonking backup ammo all over the place. So you can feel free to run through your ammo and then be like, all right, I'm just going to top that up, because very quickly your harpoon becomes far too short, far too weak, and you definitely want to upgrade at least one or two guns to just kind of act as something to take on those bigger, more aggressive fish and sharks that are definitely later in the game, because there's nothing worse than like you've got, like you said, you got so much fish on you. You might be encumbered. Well, ideally you're not encumbered, but if you die, you lose everything that you collected, bar one thing that you're allowed to save, basically. So if you're on a mission just to get, I don't know, opals or something, and then you die, you can be like, right, well, I'm going to save my opal, and everything else vanishes. So I think that's a reasonable system, because I think if you're on a mission just to get one thing and then you die, the game's fair enough to say, hey, you can keep your one thing that you want and not just completely strip you of everything. Right, yeah. I mean, as we know, Bally, we're the complete opposite. I have been using the shotgun that does 3 blasts as my main weapon. I mean, I did start with that, but I don't know. I think you'll be convinced by the sniper by the end. We'll see. Oh, we'll see. I do like just getting up in those sharks' faces and just getting 3 hits like straight off the bat, and it feels good. Very satisfying. Getting close, melee, all that sort of stuff. We talked about the progression and the systems that unlock. I think this game needs a lot of credit for taking really random ideas, just sticking it in the game, you do it, and then it just vanishes and you never see it again. And this happens constantly. I don't know how much of it you've encountered yet in BZ. I mean, so far, everything seems to have built upon each other. Like, I mean, the point that I've got to is, like, I've got to a place under the water that is like feels like more of a base area that I can go to more regularly, essentially. So I don't know if anything, it has to be past that point or whatever, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. Well, I'm really interested to see what you think 10 more hours into the game, because this game just has so much, and you're like, wow, I'm really doing this now, and oh my god, I'm doing this now, and in a kind of mini game kind of way, but not mini games in the sense of, like, I don't know, It Takes Two or something, but more mini games in the sense of, oh, now we're playing a Zelda game, oh, now we're playing WarioWare, oh, now we're playing, and a lot of it is linked to the story and taking on bosses and stuff like that, and it just feels, not all of it sticks to the landing, I'll admit, but for the majority, it's like, you know what, this game is really brave for doing something so bold, and sure, this Zelda puzzle that I'm doing is pretty rudimentary, but it's really cool that I'm doing it, and like moves on fast to other stuff. So I think all that stuff is really impressive, and is an area that makes this game shine I think throughout the 28 hours I played, it was just it got. I'd say the strongest part is maybe in the middle when all the systems are being rolled out. I don't think the ending's maybe the strongest part, but it definitely kept me going to the end. Is like, this is really cool, and like I want to see the next weird thing this game throws at me.
Right. Yeah, and I think it sounds like it uses variety as something to just constantly keep you on your toes and
all the time. Yeah.
And to just, even if it isn't like going crazy in depth with it, it is more like, oh, we just want to keep things fresh for people essentially as they go through, which is cool. And I definitely am looking forward to checking that stuff out. I think I'm getting to this point with the current place I'm at with it where I feel like, yes, I could go and search out these fish on the surface, but like really the fish I should be catching are the ones that will give me the most bang for my buck in the restaurant, right? And so in the restaurant you have this whole system of upgrading fish by spending a certain number of fish to upgrade the value of a dish.
Yeah.
And you have both happiness and money associated with each dish as well.
Yeah.
And I haven't paid as much attention to happiness. I'm more like, look, it's a video game where you make money, so that's what I'm going to try
Happiness
and do.
is just one of the barometers they use to upgrade your...
Like the ranking stuff,
ranking,
right?
And upgrading the ranking helps you unlock more dishes. And getting more dishes means you've got more variety to make more money.
Right.
I will say you're not there yet, but there will be something later in the game that makes it worthwhile going back to get old fish. They are not completely worthless because they are worth less, if that makes sense.
Okay, sure. Yeah, because I think that's the thing for me right now. It's like, well, I'm just going to go get shark meat because I can serve that big head, and that head will make me so much cash for that day, and then I can use that cash to reinvest and stuff, right? Feels like I wanted to get a lot more cash more quickly so I could upgrade stuff faster, so I could go further, that sort of stuff, right? And so, yeah, it just almost felt like I've collected so many fish now, and I'm like, well, half of these I'm just not even using or selling because their value is like eight coins per thing.
Exactly,
and I'm like, I've got things here that sell for 70 or for 100. Like, there's no way I'm going to be using you. So just like,
you could just sell all that meat, make a bit of money off it rather than just keep it.
I don't see an option to do that.
Oh yeah, you can, if you just go to your inventory, it'll say all the meat and all the seaweed and all the salt and soy or whatever you've got, and you can sell any of it just raw. You don't have to cook it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I went, so Cobra, who's the guy on the boat with you, right? He has a shop and you can sell stuff to him.
Yes.
When I try to sell stuff to him, none of my fish shows up there.
Yeah, that's not where you would sell. You can sell fish in the restaurant.
Oh, wait. So just from the restaurant menu, you can just
You
sell...
are basically selling them to a trader or something, or you're not selling them to customers, just like to get rid of. I never actually did this. I'm just suggesting you do it because looking back, I think, oh, I should have done that. But
right.
And yeah,
Am I going to lose the ability to do it? Are you saying? Am I going to lose the ability to do it?
No, I think you can always go to your ingredients and sell them if you want.
Got you.
But there'll be other things you unlock where you will get lots of fish, and then you can sell fish from there as well if you if you wanted to. Like, there's a lot. Like, and you're quite close to unlocking quite a few things, I think. There's definitely reasons to go back, get the old fish, because your example of the shark, for example, like, is it more worth progressing further to get a bigger, better shark that you can get one of, or is it better to keep getting multiples of the easy shark? Because financially they kind of will get you roughly the same thing, but one you might go even further, you might unlock something else by going further. So like, there is a kind of...
the more basic shark you will end up upgrading further if you get it more frequently, right? Because then you can spend a number of that shark meat to upgrade the quality of it, and therefore it sells for more eventually.
But there are ways... Anyway, we need to discuss this when you play.
Sure,
so many
that's
cool
fine.
systems that we can talk about.
I honestly, I don't mind like being quote unquote spoiled on other stuff. Like I'm totally cool with that.
All right, we could talk a little bit about that then. Shall I?
Yeah, because I have heard there's like some farming stuff going on and some other stuff like that.
There's not only a farm, but also a fish farm.
Right.
So when I say you can go and get that shark head shark. You can catch that shark. You might get shark eggs that appear in your fish farm. you come back and then you've got 8 of that same shark.
Oh wow!
And you can send all 8.
So wait, is this fucking Pokemon breeding now?
It's Pokemon breeding.
Oh my god!
And you can
Jesus
send
Christ.
those 8 sharks straight to your kitchen, and because you're sending 8 sharks straight to your kitchen, you can do so much upgrading of the standard of sushi, whatever, that you're selling much higher quality stuff.
Right.
Like it's. And then you go to another area and then you get an even better shark. And then all of a sudden you're breeding that type of shark. And now you're sending 10 incredibly rare shark to the kitchen. And you're making like $1,000 per dish. Like it's just insane. There's so much cool stuff you can do. I thought it was really awesome.
How much does the kind of like management of the bar, the restaurant kind of expand? Because at the moment it's like you got 2 slots for a chef, you got 2 slots for a waiter. Does that
what have I told you? Get another restaurant.
Oh my god, Jesus Christ! I assume that probably would make sense, right? Like stuff like that just keeps expanding out.
I'll be honest, I did the other restaurant very briefly, and then I was at the end of the game. Like I don't think it's a key part of getting your financials in order.
I guess it's there for people who do want to go forever, right? And have the endless experience.
I will say the fish farm and the farm are both very important, I'd say, in that late game. I think I used both of those a ton. You basically on the farm, you get a new type of rice, and this new type of rice allows you to make vegetable sushi, for example, and you can sell vegetable sushi for close to $1,000. Like it's very, very.
That seems ridiculous.
I know. Sushi. Apparently, it's the really high quality rice that people love, and
okay.
There's loads of cool stuff coming, and I just think that's like the dynamic of having the new guests like, I want this specific thing, and then you realize that specific thing they wanted is actually one of the best things in the game. We need to keep making that kind of thing, and then all of a sudden there's a new hotness. Oh, now we need to change all our systems to maximize the money coming from that. And I think that aspect was really fun, and because I definitely thought, that I've run out of things to spend money on. And every time I got to that point, they throw 10 more things at me that I could spend my money on.
I mean, I know you're not this guy, but you can decorate your restaurant.
I didn't do that once.
Yeah, of course you didn't. I know you too fucking well.
What a waste of money. If we're talking about a systems game here.
Bally's like, I'm going to sit here with my shitty looking restaurant with just regular chairs. No one's going to have a nice seat. Got to treat your guests well.
What a waste of money. I mean, in your defense, maybe there's a stat that is boosted by making a restaurant look nice. Not that I was aware of it.
I don't think there will be. I think it is purely for the cosmetic people.
But maybe they could have done that to make me less vanilla. But they failed. They failed.
Yeah. That's how it goes, I guess. It all sounds really, really good. I'm really enjoying what I've played of it so far, and it feels like it has. Does it feel like that kind of loop? Because at the moment the loop is maybe 25 minutes of like combining underwater and restaurant. How extended does that get with all this stuff? Does it feel like you have natural stopping points, or does it make it harder to put the game down with everything else kind of added on top?
I think the hardest part of putting the game down is when you've just done a really long dive and you've got some incredible fish meat, shark meat to go back to the kitchen with.
Right.
And then you go to the kitchen, you make like, I don't know, 18 grand or something insane. And then you come back to the things that you were buying and you're like $1,000 short, and you're like, I guess I just have to go on another run. And like, I think that's the strongest part of this gaming loop, is when you're always just a bit short of where you want to be in terms of the next thing you're saving for, right. And then that makes you go on another run. Like,
does it feel like deliberately designed to do that to you?
Oh, totally. The final ranking of sniper rifle I used for most of the endgame stuff, I needed 25 topaz, and topaz is very rare and is endgame stuff, and you can normally get maximum 3 to 6 chunks of it per run. So
right.
Yeah, stuff like that. It's like, wow, I guess I have to go another run, and that kind of thing. And not to say you have to get like this fanciest sniper in the game, but I was very proud of doing that, and I enjoyed that loop. So yeah, it's a really cool game. I like the systems are very strong, but this game wouldn't be as special as it is without the character and the writing and the variety, like we were saying earlier. It's got a really cool art style. Like it's doing this weird pixely thing for most of the characters, but then there are certain sea creatures that are almost a pixelated 3-dimensional version of that. And then the world is often another different type of rendering of 3D. So you've almost got like 3 different art styles blended together. Because I played this on PS5. I heard this game doesn't run the best on Switch. And I can understand why, because it's actually a pretty intensive game when you kind of put all these aspects together. Like there's a lot going on.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it has a distinct identity, and it's interesting, right? Because everyone talks about, well, Mint Rocket, they're not actually an indie team. They're owned by Nexon, and they have like all the resources in the world, which I think says a lot about kind of the way in which it has so much stuff in it. Because it feels like to do that, you do have to have like a big enough team that has the time to flex those mechanics, right? Because that's not an easy thing to do, to come up with so many bespoke different things. There's a reason only Nintendo does that with platformers, right? It's like it's so impossible to have so many unique, interesting things going on. And I think the art style is one of those things, right, where it is taking this kind of base foundation, but then it's kind of building it out in a lot of different ways, which I think is very cool, and does lend it its unique identity. So yeah, David the Diver, he's cool.
I also just want to quickly shout out the music is very, very good. And I think this game does a great job of, yes, there are tense moments where you might be running away from a shark, but there's so much like tranquil, just ambience, and there's just this nice like underwater theme, and there are so many parts of this game that are so relaxing and that you feel like in a zen state, just swimming around looking for fish. Like there's a real tangibility to how good that relaxing feels, just being underwater in the moment, and then shooting like your harpoon, like all the feedback on that, and especially with the PS5 controller, they did an amazing job with the DualSense of like making all these smaller things feel immaculate, and it just adds to a really, really impressive package. Very impressive.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I feel like it is a very good podcast game as well. Like I do have the music turned on, and it is very chill and very nice, but it's a perfect like in bed with a Steam Deck or Switch kind of game where you're sitting there and podcast playing, just kind of diving down, doing your stuff, collecting things. I think it has a good kind of rhythm to it. I think that's also like I think the writing is good in this game. Like I like it, but I think it's so kind of story wise is very incidental. Like I don't really care what's happening or much about the story.
The story's nothing special.
Yeah, exactly. So like I do kind of do the thing, I do Bally, which is kind of turn my brain off and just kind of A button through dialogue. Something about the dialogue I think is maybe it's just the way the font is done. I do find the font a little weird, or the like text box is a little funky. And so for some reason my brain doesn't absorb the text as well, but I don't think that matters really. I feel like at its core this is a deeply mechanically driven experience, and yes, like you said, it has a narrative to follow and credits to hit, but I don't think that's really the point of it from a enjoyment perspective. The enjoyment is about like having these systems like build on top of each other, right, and eventually finish. So yeah. It's very good.
You're gonna finish it, MBZ?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely gonna finish it. Question is when. I think I'll probably get back to it soon. I was away and I took my Switch with me instead of my Steam Deck, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, now I'm back. I do feel like I will get back into it. It's been very difficult to play anything while I've been in this state, so have not really played much since I got back. But yeah, it's. I had a really good kind of like week or so with it, and I put 9 hours in like a few days, right? So spoke to the fact that I was really enjoying it. So I think for me it's just like it's going to be a routine thing of like get to bed a couple hours early and then just play Dave for a bit, and I'll be done with it before you know it, I'm sure. So
nice.
So yeah, very good.
What did you play on your Switch?
Yeah, so I went to Chicago for a work trip, which incidentally, by the way, there will be a mini audio log that I will put up whenever I edit that. For Chicago, not very long, but I just thought, I'm traveling, I'll do another one.
Spoilers, is Chicago better or worse than Los Angeles?
Oh, way fucking better than Los Angeles. And I only went into Chicago.
Even with COVID, it's great.
Yeah, I only went into Chicago for a combined total of maybe 4 hours, because literally we were confined to a hotel and a meeting room area that was inside the hotel. So yeah, for the most part, I didn't actually see anything in Chicago. But yeah, I'll talk about that more on that thing. As for the plane, so I brought my Switch with me. Mainly this is this hang up I have, Bally, of like, if you play a Steam Deck outside of the internet, you don't get your hours tracked properly, and so just fucking, I wouldn't want to play Dave the Diver, and then not have it say the correct hour count.
This one of the most insane things that you've moaned about to me recently. Like
it's not that insane. Bally, come on, we're the same person with this shit. It's not insane. This would drive you insane as well. I know it would. Okay, I know it would drive you insane.
I mean, the amount of airtime you're getting at the moment. It's a big problem. I get that.
It is a big problem.
But airtime is valuable game time. And
it is very valuable. And I did use it correctly. So I, a while back, picked up on sale on Switch Super Meat Boy Forever. Now, if you listen to this podcast for any amount of time, you'll know we're both big fans of hardcore 2D platformers, including games like Celeste, and of course the original game that really sparked off this style of platformer, which is...
way back in like 2011? 12?
I think 11 it was Super Meat Boy, which, the original I think is still held up as a classic by a lot of people. I still think it holds up pretty well.
I played it in like 2017 and had a great time.
Yeah, I think it's a really good game still, and... it's worth playing. Now, the sequel, Super Meat Boy Forever, had been in development for years and years and years, and so this goes back to a history of... you watched Indie Game the movie, right?
Yes.
And Meat Boy was built by a team of two. One was Edmund Macmillan, who worked on the art, and the other one was the programmer, Tommy Refinas. And after Meat Boy shipped, that team kind of split apart, and so Edmund went and did his own thing, and became a worldwide phenomenon for creating The Binding of Isaac, which is like one of the most revered indie games ever made. Like, on a success level, probably dwarfs Super Meat Boy by like a factor of 100 to 1. Like, that's how successful Binding of Isaac was, which is mad. So he went on to be mega successful. Meanwhile, Tommy kind of stayed with the name Team Meat and decided to work on another Super Meat Boy game. And initially, this game was being developed for mobile exclusively. And I think that was a bit of a bummer for a lot of people, because people were like, well, I want a proper Super Meat Boy game. And then they kind of shifted course a little bit. And, I think this took like 7-8 years. It was in development for a very long time. And they decided to put it on console as well. But the design had always maintained that kind of mobile feel to it, which essentially was, instead of a kind of controlled precision platformer, it was now an auto-running game where you just pressed the jump button at precise times in order to get through the stage. And so you had to use the momentum that was given to you, as well as like specific like enclaves and things like that to like create your own route through, but really it was more about like the specific path you had to take and what you had to do. And when this came out originally, it seemed like it didn't garner the greatest reviews of all time. I think people thought it was okay, it was interesting, it was fine, but people didn't love it. And so I was interested because I'm a fan of Super Meat Boy, and so I decided to download it on Switch and then proceeded to not play it. And so I was like, well, now's a good time to play something that is low impact, that I can listen to a podcast while doing. That's always what I'm looking for on a plane, is a game that I can listen to a podcast and is something I can kind of turn my brain off to, but also is fun and enjoyable and keeps my brain busy. And this kind of just hit all of those markers, right? So I started playing it actually the weekend before I went, and I was enjoying it, but I was like, something about this just doesn't feel quite right. And I got to a boss, and the boss just was very frustrating. It just felt very finicky and just like annoying to deal with. And so I got onto that flight, and I started playing again, and I realized with the boss, so the way that it works is that you press a button to jump. You can also hold it down to do like a slide, and when you do a slide underneath something, you also punch with your fist. So down is also a attack, and if you press down while being in the air, you also kind of like dive bomb down, so you can kind of like take your speed and make yourself kind of go closer. It's
similar to Bit Trip Runner.
Little bit, yeah. I guess like the like fast falling in Smash Brothers, where you're like having to get down. Yeah, it's kind of like that, but you like go even faster down to the ground with this slam. And so there's a little bit more kind of like flexibility in that than you expect. And so this first boss fight is kind of this robot that's kind of climbing up vertically up a shaft, and you have to stay alive, because it's a one-hit death, right? And you have to basically stay in the air, punching these 4 red buttons on this boss, and 2 of them are on the inside and 2 of them are on the outside, and every so often the boss will kind of lift up a chain blade and like slam it down to like where it thinks you're going to be. And so it's this dance of like sliding on walls, staying out of the way. And what I realized is like, oh, you can actually do a bunch of damage by just smashing the A button to do a bunch of damage. What I was doing previously was like, 1 hit, go away, 1 hit, go away. And you can imagine how much fucking longer that takes if you're doing it at that pace. And I was like, how the fuck do you have the patience to do this? And I realized, no, you just spam the button a bunch and then you actually do it much faster. So I figured that out, and that made things much easier. And from then onwards, I started to get into the groove a lot more. I was like, you know what? This is actually really fun. Like, it just has a kind of like a feel to it, and like a movement of like, there's a bit of puzzle solving as well. Every world introduces a new mechanic, something slightly different that will make you approach things in a different way. And I think that like it does a good job of pacing that stuff out, and never really feels like they're repeating ideas or doing anything different. It is quite short, right? It's only 4 worlds long, and each world is about 8 levels with a boss. And I really liked learning all of these spaces, as well as the bosses. Like, the boss fights were very, very challenging. Like, you really have to figure out exactly what you have to do. And I can see for a lot of people getting frustrating, but there was something about it, something about the struggle in a platformer, right? Something about just like banging your head against the wall endlessly until you finally figure out what is the thing, how do you do it, and then you execute it perfectly. And like the final boss of this game, I played it on the flight back from Chicago, and I was just actually, was it flight back? I think actually no, it was the flight. It was as we were getting to the end of it, basically, and I was just locked in, purely locked in, my pure focus. I think it took me like an hour and a half on this one boss fight, and it was just slowly getting further and further every single time, and learning new things. Jeez. And my hands were just fucking bleeding by the end. Like my thumb was just like.
I thought you said this was like a nice chill podcast game for the
well,
play.
yeah. When I say chill podcast game, what I really mean is something that I don't have to pay attention to a story for, which is basically what this is. Which
but your hands bleeding, that's perfectly chill.
Yeah. No, that's the thing is, that is much better because it gets me in the zone and I just forget about everything else, right? And so time just melts away. So it's actually really, really good for that. And yeah, this final boss fight, I was like, fuck. This thing is really challenging, and you could say bullshit, but I got to a point where I was just absolutely precisely nailing it, and it just felt really good. So yeah, I surprisingly came away from it being like, you know what, I really enjoyed that. I thought it was going to be a bit of a middling thing, and from an objective perspective, is it as good? Like, nowhere close to as good as the original Super Meat Boy, but I think like if you want an auto-run platformer that has a lot of challenge to it, and it has levels that you really have to learn and you have to practice and you have to play again and again to get through them, I definitely recommend people give it a go, because I think it has something in there. And yeah, I came away from it much more positive than I thought I would be. So yeah, I'm glad that I finally finished it. It's one of those games. I've got a few games on Switch like this that have just been sitting around for ages that I picked up in sales, like Blasphemous I want to get to, Everhood, that kind of Undertale rhythm style game.
You see all these games I've got sitting around on my Switch.
Yeah.
I tell you, if I cannot transfer all these games sitting around on my Switch to the Switch 2, I'm going to be livid because I've got so many.
Honestly, part of my concern is like, I should probably get rid of these before I get Switch 2, because inevitably there's going to be some way where I can't actually access them on that, and then I won't want to go back.
The rumours suggest we will be able to. That's the rumour.
That's what we don't know. But, we don't know. So I don't know. Like, there's a chance, but yeah, I would like to just kind of get through a lot of this backlog before the new system arrives. Yeah, because to be fair, I probably won't mind going back to Switch because it's going to have an OLED screen, and we almost certainly know that this new one is not going to. So there'll still be a benefit to going back to original Switch hardware.
I think that's something I'm telling myself about Switch 2. I'll get, when the OLED eventually inevitably does come, I think I'm going to go day one for the Switch 2 OLED.
Yeah, 100%. Like, now that I've seen the light on... Yeah, and I've seen the light on OLED for both Steam Deck and Switch, and I'm like, I'm never fucking going back. Like, no, never. It just doesn't make any sense. But yeah, that's one ticked off. And yeah, I've also been playing. I played a bit of Bayonetta Origins on the plane. But I can talk about that when I finish that, which is really good. And yeah, and then also on the flight back, me and my colleague were like, oh, we both brought our Switches, right? and she brought her dock as well, and we were like, oh yeah, we can play in like hotel rooms and stuff. We just had no time to do that, but on the way back we're like, here's the thing, you can do local play on Nintendo Switch. And this is the thing, I don't think I've ever done local play on Nintendo Switch, of like being in the same room as somebody,
get your link cable out, plug
yeah,
it
exactly
in.
yeah. So we're actually like across the aisle from each other on the plane back, and
walking
so
right through that link cable.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So someone could have done that back in the day. But we were like, all right, let's fucking do some local. So we played Mario Kart and we played Smash. Okay, and I have to say, the local play on Switch is just. It's one of those things I didn't think like even existed anymore, but like, of course Nintendo still puts that in there, and I'm so glad they do, because it's like, otherwise you have to connect to an internet thing, and then you wouldn't be able to do this like on a trip, on a car trip or on a plane trip or whatever. And it was really good fun. Actually very funny. We're very even. Again, I'm worse than Mario Kart than most people, and so she was kicking my ass in Mario Kart, which was to be expected. I did win, I think, one race, but most of the ones.
This is also the two of us exposing ourselves to the rest of the world for Smash Brothers, where we think we're actually really good, but just in reality we're both just as bad as each other. So it makes it really competitive between the two of us. And then when we have a tournament with our community, we get.
It's actually no. It's very true, but. I think for Smash Brothers, she's probably about the same skill as us, which was really enjoyable. So it was like a very nice, even playing field for both games, which was really good. So had a very fun time playing Smash and Mario Kart, and just like, man, both of those games on the OLED, just handheld, they play so well. They really play amazingly.
That's awesome.
One of the things I realize as well with Mario Kart is when I'm playing handheld, I need a different setup than when I'm playing on console. Like, the handling felt so off on my regular setup when I was playing handheld versus on the TV, because I was like, surely I'm using the same setup as I always do.
You probably have just a very worn out Joy-Con or something.
No, I don't think it is that, because what happened was I changed the wheels and suddenly the handling felt so much better to me. I think it is specifically the way that the game feels to play on handheld is different to how it feels to play on a console or on the big screen, basically. And so when I'm playing handheld, I have to now remember I use these wheels versus other wheels that I use when I'm playing on a big screen, which is a weird thing, I know.
You got your Mario Kart 7 brain.
As you know, Bally, I am very specific, pernickety about
now, you're actually going to claim that you're better at Mario Kart handheld, and that's why you need to play handheld on the TV.
Look, here's the thing, Bally. As soon as I changed my wheels, I was far more competitive. I did win a race with those new wheels. I'm just saying, just put it out there.
There's a reason I'm in the driving seat and you're throwing green shells out the back. Like, let's not rock the boat here.
Look, okay, all I know is that I'm very pernickety, all right? And
Yes.
That's how it works,
You are the most pernickety Mario Kart player I've ever encountered.
Yeah, I'm very, I have my criticisms. But Smash was really good fun as well. It was good to just, I realized, I was like, oh, do you realize my archetype here is just fucking the anime people with swords? That's all the characters that I play.
Yeah.
It was very funny. To
counter that with some Yoshi egg action.
Yeah. I did mention, because she was playing as Yoshi in Mario Kart, and I was like, she's giving me fucking war flashbacks. Because my friend does this shit to me where he just throws me off the side, which is very, very funny.
In the most slapstick, just most hilarious way possible. This is one of the most hilarious moves in that whole game. Come on, it's comedy gold.
It is comedy. It's also the most infuriating thing that's ever happened to me ever in my life. I think it's good.
I'm trying to work out what damage do you think you have to be at roughly before you can't actually escape before you KO off the screen? I want to say 90s, 100-ish.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. You just fucking hear the spamming of the buttons through the microphone, and you know that you've won. It's just the panic.
I can't help but just start laughing my ass off the second I pull it off, and I just hear you go no, it's mashing the buttons manically, and
it sucks.
Good times.
Yeah. Also, shout out to PictoChat. So. Me and her talk about we're like the most Nintendo people the company basically, and so we talk about PictoChat all the time. So on the plane there is there's a fucking like messaging functionality, and so we talk about PictoChat like before we got on the flight, and then I was like just messaging through this message functionality, being like, this is our plain PictoChat that we finally have figured out how to use, which is very funny. So
they have you can message another seat on
yes,
the plane.
so you can go onto the plane thing and you can type in the seat number of somebody and just send them a message, which is very weird because I don't know. This is American Airlines.
American Airlines. Okay.
Yeah.
Weird.
So yeah, that was a fun thing.
Does
as
it
well.
with a touchscreen or is it typing?
Yeah, it's got a touchscreen. It's got a touchscreen, but it's also got a fucking like gamepad. It's got the remote, right, that you pop out, but then it has a full keyboard on the back of the remote, so you can use that to type as well, which is a very, very funny thing.
Very weird.
So yeah, so it was an enjoyable trip.
Awesome.
And yeah, that's mainly what I've been playing. Like I said, I'll play more Dave for next time. Hopefully finish that, and yeah, Bayonetta is the other one.
Good.
So
very good.
Some good stuff.
Cool. Well, we'll get to those games next time. But yeah, we're going to wrap up what we've been playing, and we will see you in the second segment for some emails. Don't go anywhere. Hello everyone and welcome back to the second part of today's show. It's that time again. It's time for emails. We've not done emails in quite a while. The well is it's not dry, but it's not wet either. I'd say it's like lightly moist, which isn't ideal. Like you want a really full well of emails. If you would like to send an email into the show, please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We also have a channel in our Discord server. You can also post there and we'll answer your emails over there, which is exactly what McGill did. They posted on Discord, "Hi Bally and MBZ, I just got very lucky and won a PS5. I've not had any non-Nintendo systems since the GameCube, so wondering where you would start with anything I've missed out on since then. My first port of call are Spider-Man, God of War, and The Last of Us, but other than that, I'm completely open to suggestions." And seeing this as a very non-Nintendo based question, you can also answer the inverse as well, as if someone is asking for Nintendo games that they might have missed out on since the PS2 era. Thanks.
So, PlayStation 5 is a video game system, and I think it's interesting when you talk about somebody who has like missed out, because I'm like, how much have we really missed out on? I think there's a lot of like conversation about this generation of like, are there like exclusive games for the PlayStation 5? Are there really that many? The answer is no, almost none, to be precise. But I think that there's definitely a lot of games that you could get there that you can't get on Nintendo platforms, right? And so there's definitely still that distinction. But if we're talking about like games just for that system, I think it's actually far less than I would imagine like would have been in the past, right?
I think it's pretty less than in the past because of the length of development cycles, right? Like there's just fewer games. Like Uncharted is the best example where 1, 2, and 3 were like 1 year apart, 2 years apart at points.
2 years, yeah.
And then, you know, between 3 and 4, it took ages. And then 4 and The Lost Legacy, I know, was like extended DLC. And who knows if there's going to be a next one and how long that could take. So, like, it's a good example of, yes, if you increase the development cycle on these games, and Sony are very guilty of making one very similar type of game, turns out you end up with very few games on your current gen system. But
yeah,
I still think I think at this point in time, I'm probably the slightly bigger Sony pony than MBZ is right now. But I think there's a lot of value in the the types of games Sony make, I'm very here for. Like Last of Us, Spider-Man, obvious shouts. Astrobot is already on the system. We've got Astrobot coming this September. That is going to be an absolute banger. Obviously, games like Ratchet and Clank are worth checking out. The Horizon games, as I said, all the Uncharted games. These are obvious suggestions. But I actually think that something you can't experience as easily on Nintendo platforms is soaking in a nice frame rate on indies and open world games. So games like Kena Bridge of Spirits. Did that game ever get ported? To Switch? I don't know.
I don't think it did. No.
But it runs and looks great on.
It's a game with a lot of Nintendo energy, right?
A lot of Nintendo energy. A lot harder than it looks. Like, don't be fooled by its art style. It's a damn tough game. But also games like The Pathless, which I think is on Switch, but will just run so much nicer on PS5. I really enjoyed playing that game on PS5. Like, I think there's real merit in playing those sorts of games. But then the big boys that are third party, like Elden Ring, like I'm still 30 hours trucking through that game. It's still really cool. I would still recommend Elden Ring if you've not played a Nintendo system before. And then my game of the year from 2021, I think it was, It Takes Two. Like, I think obviously that game's also on Switch. But again, a lot of these experiences I wouldn't say run the best on Switch, and like we've said with our top 50 games of all time, we don't really count to them towards that because it wouldn't be our preferred platform to play them on. And then the final big boys, I'm actually playing Rebirth right now, but Final Fantasy VII Remake, in terms of like PlayStation exclusives, it's also a good example of something that's a bit different to the other games because it's a JRPG and it's just got a very impressive battle. I think the battle system is phenomenal, and it's a very good story. I never played the original Final Fantasy VII, but I really enjoyed Remake. I think Rebirth is quite a long game, and I'm still working my way through it, but it's also a very impressive game. But those are some obvious ones from me.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the nice things about saying, okay, well, I haven't had a Nintendo system since the GameCube means that for a PS5, it's actually quite easy to go back and look through the list of PS4 games that came out as well. Because I definitely think that was an era where there are at least there are a few more games being released than there are today. And, you know, it's still, I think PS3 probably still had more than that, but I think that PS4 was still a little bit more in terms of the output.
And also in terms of like new IP or reboots, whether it's like Spider-Man, God of War, you know, they all started PS4.
Ghost of Tsushima, right, is a good example, I think, of one that you can see. This is the thing. I was like, it's really confusing because the stupid thing about PS5 is like, okay, so I have Ghost of Tsushima. I could buy the PS5 version, but also there's a 60 frames per second patch for the PS4 version. So like in that case, what's the difference? You know, I'm like,
wait, there's a PS5 version?
There's a PS5 specific deluxe version, and you can also just get a patch for free for the PS4 version on your PS5.
This drove me so crazy that I didn't even want to buy the Ghost of Tsushima DLC. It was so confusing and I hated it. And I wish it was just a standalone thing like Miles Morales, where it was like, right, here's Miles Morales. It's a PS5 game, well, it's also a PS4 game. Take your pick. It's just very simple. I hated the messaging on the Ghost of Tsushima DLC. It was infuriating.
Right, now if you're coming to it now, it's a lot easier because you can just be like, oh, probably the PS5 version of Tsushima you can probably find for cheap somewhere at this point in time. So that's probably the easiest thing to do and not have to worry about all this other stuff. But I think in that weird console generation transition, it made things a lot trickier. For example, another game with some Nintendo energy, Sackboy's Big Adventure, which is a PS5 launch title, which I have played like 4 or 5 hours of over the course of like 3 years. I just randomly jump in every now and again.
Is it pretty good?
It's alright, yeah. It has Bruno Mars songs in it. I'm like, what the fuck is... Yeah.
It made so few waves. It was so weird. It was... I don't know.
Yeah, it's because it's just fine. It has like levels where you like play it to Bruno Mars's Grenade and shit like that. And I'm like, what the fuck is this video game? There's a lot of weird stuff happening there. But when I got that, I redeemed that code, and the code was supposed to be a redemption for both PS4 and PS5. Keep in mind, I got this code before I had a PS5, so I redeemed it on PS4, And having redeemed it on PS4, it only gave me the PS5 copy. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? This is so stupid. And so I had to wait until I bought a PS5 like 2 years later to actually play this game that I had gotten a code for. It was very, very silly. But yeah, I think when I think about like things that you've missed out on from those eras, there's also like a bunch of like remasters and remakes of older games, also from both the PS3 era and onwards. But also
not as many as you would hope.
Not as many. I'd say like there are the stuff from the PS2 generation. Like there's the brand new Shadow of the Colossus remake that happened, right?
That is a great shout. I loved that game. It's so cool.
But I guess like if you grew up in the PS2, or if you had Nintendo consoles in the PS2, I'm assuming you would have played Shadow of the Colossus, right? So that one might not be as relevant. I mean, I guess like all the Souls games, right? All the Souls games that have happened in that entire generation, right? That's an entire genre of games that came into existence since the GameCube era.
Yeah, and stuff like Demon Souls is PS5 exclusive.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely a port of call to go to, and like that's an endless font of like video games. Like that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of stuff through just that one series. So there's a lot there. I think for me it's weird because I would have come to you and said, well, finally you can play the Persona series, but like at this point we are at this place where all those games are now on Nintendo platforms, so I don't have to do that anymore, right? Because my go-to answer is like, well, play Persona 5, right? That's the thing. As a Nintendo person, as like someone who likes RPGs potentially, you would be very interested in. I think that's
to your knowledge, there's not like much of a visual fidelity drop off. That's not important. It's not that kind of game.
There is, but like I think the trade-off is handheld versus having that. And I think handheld always probably wins for me in those scenarios, right? Just from a convenience.
Xenoblade Chronicles 3DS, that's where it's at.
100%. That's, oh boy. But yeah, you know, like I think that definitely has a factor to play. And Persona 5, like here's the frankness of it. Persona 5 is a game that was originally made for the PlayStation 3. And was still released on the PlayStation 3. And so putting it on the Switch is basically the same power as a PlayStation 3, right? So I don't think it actually makes much of a difference at the end of the day. So, like, yes, you could play Persona 5 and 4. And actually, well, Persona 3 Reload is an interesting case because that isn't available on Switch yet. That isn't on a Nintendo platform. So if you do want to play all the Personas in a row...
You'll need a Switch too.
Yeah, I'm sure that will happen. But if you want to do them all in a row, then I would say PS5 is a good place to do that. I mean, of course, for me, I'm just going to say play every Yakuza game that's ever existed. They've all been remastered. They're all on PlayStation. You can play 1 through 6. You can play 0. Ishin is on there. Both Judgment games and 7 and 8 as well. So... yeah, every single Yakuza game is on PS5, and if you don't play them, then I'm sorry, but you are a worse person in my eyes. So those are all very important. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like there are so many games that you can play on that system. I don't feel like any of them like speak to me on like a level of like from a Nintendo fan's perspective, right? If we're recommending this is somebody who's not had a non-Nintendo console in such a long time, what are the kind of experiences that you resonate with? There's just quite hard, I think, to find games like that, right? On not Nintendo systems.
Yeah, I think we were saying it before, but it is wild to me that Sony and Microsoft, for that matter, don't make more games like Astrobot and Ratchet because, you know, parents don't always like buying violent games for their kids, and I think the family audience is something that Nintendo has absolutely nailed. And, you know, Luigi's Mansion, Tears of the Kingdom, Mario, these are games that appeal not just to kids but to adults and everyone in between, and I don't fully understand why companies like Sony don't aim for that wider market more often. And yeah, even games like Spider-Man are outsold by Luigi's Mansion, which is just wild. Like when you think
it's crazy.
About it. So, and that's like one of their biggest best sellers. So it is strange.
It is, yeah, it is quite weird. But yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of stuff to get your teeth into. I think there's also like there's a lot more kind of like free to play things on these consoles that are the more live servicey type stuff that you just won't find on a Nintendo platform. Stuff like Destiny. I mean, obviously you can play Fortnite on Switch, but it's not the best experience on there. I mean, for me, stuff like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, they are both available on PlayStation. I think actually, weirdly enough, those are like the more Nintendo-y style experiences compared to a lot of other stuff out there. I mean, Genshin is straight up a Breath of the Wild ripoff that merges gacha games with open world exploration, and Honkai Star Rail is a turn-based RPG, so like it has a kind of traditional Japanese kind of mechanical bend to it that I think a lot of people who like Nintendo games will kind of vibe with. And yeah, there's a lot of issues with gacha games, all their problems, but I do think that they are very nice looking games, and ones that are very easy to jump into and get a bit of time out of. So I'd say those are interesting in points as well. But yeah, I don't know. Like if you want to play Stray, I guess if you're one of those people, you can play that.
Yeah, I do think the good looking indie, I think, is something that has become a lot more prevalent in the last 5-ish years. So like I said, Kanan, The Pathless, Stray is a good example. Trying to think of other indies that are that kind
Sifu.
Sifu, yeah, that's a great shout. Actually, there's a lot more games that demand just a bit more oomph that I think you're just gonna get on PS5 and not Switch at this point in time. And
Chia is a good one as well. That has very big kind of Zelda-y exploration energy.
Yeah, I'd like to try that game sometime.
It's just been announced it's coming to Game Pass in like a week.
Oh,
so
damn. Okay, let's do it.
Alongside The Case of the Golden Idol coming to Game Pass on July 9th, I think. That just got announced today on Xbox's thing. So, yeah.
Would you have known that Chia news without the Golden Idol news?
Yeah, probably, because I would have looked at the Xbox drop anyway. But I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's our game.
I remember very fondly 2018. I was in the same position. I had never owned a Nintendo system, and Spider-Man in particular had taken my fancy, and that was coming out later in the year 2018. But God of War, the reboot, was coming, when was it, like April or something? May?
Yeah.
Earlier in the year. And I thought, screw it, I'm going to get a PS4. I want to play God of War and I want to play Spider-Man. And I think, regardless of your opinion on those games, I think that type of game, visually, narratively, it's a very important pillar of the gaming industry. Like, it's a very impressive, this is where all the money's going kind of game. And it is cool that Sony has a lot of those. At the same time, it's also one of the more negative aspects of Sony, arguably, is that a lot of the games are quite similar. But certainly for me in 2018, when I wasn't jaded at all on that type of game, they were just phenomenal. And now at this point in time, what are we, 6 years on? I've played loads of that type of game, and I think I find that type of game has to do a bit more than it was doing back then. For example, I bounced off Jedi Survivor a bit. Like, there were aspects of that game I was like, oh, that could have been stronger, and these narrative beats don't feel as consistent. And I think Sony are better, whether it's Last of Us, Spider-Man, Horizon, Uncharted, they're better at dangling that narrative carrot and having a more compelling story that just drives everything on in a unique way. And I'm personally still a huge fan. I know, MBZ, you're a little more lukewarm on that type of game, but I still think it's an important type of game that I think everyone should experience.
Yeah, and it just seems like there's going to be fewer of them because they take longer to make.
Yes.
Sony kind of want everything to be Helldivers now, it seems. So
that's quite a scary reality.
Yeah, I've got a few more actually that I think make a lot of sense. So one of them is, I mean, Nintendo fans are Monster Hunter fans at the end of the day, and so Monster Hunter World never came to Switch, right? Is probably like the big boy kind of pretty Monster Hunter, and obviously Wilds is coming out soon as well. So both of those I think are good places to point to. Two trilogies that kind of came out in the PS3, PS4 era that I think actually have a lot of Nintendo energy. The first one is the Batman Arkham series, the first game of which is basically a Metroid Prime like in a sense, or a Metroid like, where it is a kind of contained area with a map and kind of ability unlocks and all that sort of stuff. It's very, very good.
We played it a couple of years ago and had an amazing time.
which I think is great. And the other Arkham games are all available very easily as well. They more lean into the open world side of things, but that whole trilogy is something that everyone is a big fan of. The other one for me is the Tomb Raider trilogy, reboot trilogy, which I think has a lot of Nintendo energy in the design of its tombs are very Zelda dungeon adjacent, like really good puzzle solving, environmental puzzle solving that I really liked, and the sort of thing that you don't quite get out of Uncharted. Like, where Uncharted, I think, is far stronger on a narrative and character level, the Tomb Raider games never really get there, but I actually think I prefer the gameplay of the Tomb Raider games on a fundamental, like, design standpoint of, ooh, I get excited when I find a tomb, and inside the tomb there's going to be this puzzle, and I'm going to figure out this puzzle and get these levers to move, and there's a water wheel, and like all this sort of stuff, like interlocking environmental systems design that leads to...
Do you prefer them on the running and gunning?
I think they're probably similar-ish, I guess, to me. Like, I think both are competent at that stuff. But yeah, the puzzle stuff for Tomb Raider, I think, is way, way better and actually feels more at home if you're a Nintendo fan, because it is much more about, like, tombs are essentially Zelda dungeons, right? They're kind of mini Zelda dungeons in a way, and I think they're really, really the highlight of that series. So I'd recommend people checking out that trilogy, because I think that has a lot of Nintendo energy. And then something that you just can't really find on Nintendo platforms are first-person shooters, and two of the best first-person shooters of the last generation were on PlayStation 4. Those are Titanfall and Titanfall 2. Original Titanfall is hard to go back to because it doesn't really have a campaign, but Titanfall 2, you can just play the campaign for that if you wanted and have a really good time. But also I think it's one of the best multiplayer shooters I've ever played. Just phenomenal, and very worth going back to, and also super cheap these days. So those would be my other kind of recommendations to round out a list, I guess.
Overwatch and Apex Legends.
Yeah, totally. You can play those on Switch.
But,
I wouldn't play them on Switch, but you can play them on Switch. But yeah.
Let's very quickly flip this on its head, like Miguel says. So, if you're picking up a Nintendo system and you've only been inundated with the PS2 era, I think we don't have to spend that long on this, but we have made a top 50 games of all time on Nintendo platforms, and I think that list is very much shapes our opinions on what we think people should play.
It's also mostly modern, right? It's also mostly
I think
stuff.
We've got a very modern skew on that list for sure. We cut the bullshit when it's we don't let nostalgia get games up the list like the industry seems to always do. So yeah, I definitely think check out our most recent list, which is from episode 250, and you've got all your top Nintendo franchises in there. You've got a ton of indie games in there that we feel very strongly about that I guess you can play on a non-Nintendo platform. Yeah,
and that's the weird thing with this, right? Is like in the past, if we were still in the Wii U era, I'd be like, oh yeah, go play Hyper Light Drifter and go play but all these games are on Switch now and they play better on Switch because they're handheld, and like you can't really make that argument for like, oh, I gotta play, because PS4 was the era where Sony were really going after indie games and they had a lot of them on the system and it was a real big driver for them.
I feel like Sony's dropped off on indie so hard, where
significantly,
like I think they're getting indie games are coming to PlayStation so far after like Xbox and Switch. It's wild, and those versions are often very good still. And in fact, when I monitor like deal prices on Deku Deals, like often the PlayStation game for whatever reason is often cheaper, but it is wild that it just feels like they've dropped the ball, and with some exceptions like the Pathless and Kena, where they got like exclusive deals and things, or at least temporarily exclusive deals, feels like they've just gone off the boil and that stuff. It's very strange.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, think that wraps that question. Do you have any final thoughts from Miguel? Any final suggestions?
I think you should just only play Yakuza games until you're done, and then you can never play video games again, and you'll just be happy. You'll just be happy for the rest of your life, frankly. You're
going to get one a year till the day we die. And
oh god, Bally, I'm so, I'm just really anxious because I've only got one Yakuza game in my back pocket. Like, once I run out, that's it.
What's the one in your back pocket?
I've got Ishin, which is the old timey one that is I have on PS5.
Okay.
And I'm waiting for a good time to use it. I say this having 5-6 months ago just played an 80-hour Yakuza game, and I already am getting the itch again. I'm like, but it would be nice to go back and play one of it. I don't know what it is.
I think going to Japan has like done that to you now.
Oh sure, yeah.
Need to go back, do more.
No, I think that's just me generally with this series. I don't know what it is. I love it so much.
I will get to Yakuza 0, and that because I do need to try at least one, and it will happen. I just need to beat Elden Ring, and then my life will be free again.
Bally, I think you just need to give up on being Elden Ring. Once you do that, once you free yourself from it, then you will be able to do so many more things with your life.
I will remain tarnished until I am untarnished, and that is that.
Oh boy.
But yeah, that's all we've got time for emails. We're just going to cover one today because MBZ is feeling a bit under the weather. But that email address again is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We do need more. The well is almost dry, but I won't.
Moist, you said. You said it was moist, Bally.
It's not coming out again. And I guess this is where MBZ, you would plug all the places that we are, so I'm going to give it a go. We're on Stitcher and we're on Spotify. We'd really appreciate any ratings on Spotify. Those do really great. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube. We're on all your favorite podcasting apps across the interwebs. Definitely check us out, review us, rate us, tell your friends about us. We would really, really appreciate that. And I guess I've also got some patrons to thank. So thank you to all of our patrons, but in particular, we'd like to thank our $10 tier plus patrons. They are Zach S., Thomas, Matthew, Albert, Wicked Gamer UK, Alan Turtle, Orange Thunder, and Ali T. We always appreciate our support from Ali T. But yeah, what's coming up on Patreon, I guess, I can't remember what we talked about last time. I guess we were covering everything announced in Summer Game Fest that wasn't Nintendo related, so that was a damn good show to talk about. You just said you've got a little travelogue coming up, MBZ. Do you want to say something about that?
Sure. I talked about being in Chicago, mainly in a hotel, and then a little bit outside of a hotel. But that'll go up at some point on the $5 tier, so keep an eye out for that.
Excellent.
I think for the next non-Nintendo show, I'll probably talk a lot about Wuthering Waves, another gacha game that's got its claws into me.
I've also beaten Hellblade 2, so I'm going to be talking about that. I've got a lot to say about that, but we'll get there. We shall get there. Well, I think this is my closing thoughts. MZ, do you have anything final to say before the end of this fine episode?
No, you
throw that green shell. You go for it.
I'm going to bed.
Your mushroom. Yeah, let's go. Right. Okay. But yeah, I guess that's all we've got time for this time. Until next time, this is goodbye.